We're going to take our Bibles and go to the book of Ecclesiastes. So we're going to be talking about understanding Ecclesiastes, which may be a little bit difficult at times, but we're going to try and navigate through the book of Ecclesiastes. And I could have titled it, Without GPS, Finding Purpose is Hard. And when you think about GPS, you think about global positioning systems, but I'm thinking about how without GPS, God positioning systems, where God is leading us and guiding us. And so we want to have God lead us. And as we think about 2026, we cannot expect to disregard God and do well. And so we want to follow him. And we want to understand Ecclesiastes because it's very interesting. Ecclesiastes, if we see here, the word Ecclesiastes, actually the word means, it's similar to our word that we have, the Greek word of ecclesi, what is it called? Ecclesia, that's what I was trying to say. I knew it didn't sound right. Ecclesia, that's the word I was looking for. Ecclesia means a called out assembly, and then a preacher, a pastor is speaking to them. And so really what is really emphasized here is there is a preacher that's saying, call out and listen to what I got to say. Basically, that's what chapter 1, verse 1 talks about, the words of the preacher. He's, again, the guy calling whoever the people out to hear what he's got to say, the son of David, king in Israel. Now, as we think about this, he calls himself a preacher. And of course, we know the human author of this whole book is going to be Solomon. And really it narrows it down pretty easily because he was the only true king. I know there was another son that wanted to be king for a temporary time, but he did not last long as they required that Solomon would be the king that would be anointed. So Solomon becomes the king. David, who is the mother of Solomon? Somebody on this side over here. The mother of Solomon. Bathsheba, all right? And so that's maybe odd for some people to understand because weird enough, David had, Michal was his first wife, which is the daughter of Saul. And then he ended up having Naboth's wife when he died. Not Naboth, what am I trying to say? Abigail, who was the guy? Nabal. And I think he also married the handmaid to Abigail. Yeah, that goes along with it. It's a package deal, You get the handmaid with that deal, I guess. Yeah, it was Abigail, which was the wife of Nabal. When God smote his heart and he died, then David said, I kind of remember that chick. And by the way, Michal was not with him at one point here. And so Michal was actually taken back and she ends up being given over to another man. And then when David does come back into the story, she comes back to him, but they never see each other, basically. And so a lot of bitterness in that whole situation, and that's too bad. The Bible never really gives us any encouragement towards more than one wife. And I believe in today's economy, today's way, I'm glad that mostly our society believes that is best. Now, I know that there's some people say one wife at a time, so you have like 10 wives. Well, that's not the answer either. One wife, that's, the Bible talks about husband of one wife. Again, I feel like that's a good requirement for all of us. And so if we're going to get married. But so he's this preacher as the son of David, the third king. You have Saul was the first king of Israel. David was the second king. And then Solomon became the third king. And so it's very interesting because when Solomon started his reign, almost we're going to have to go back. And I think I will. I'll go back to 1 Kings in just a moment here. 1 Kings chapter 3. Keep your finger here if you want to keep your finger looking at this. But I think we have to remind ourselves of what Solomon was like. Maybe I should do this first, though. I should say this. I believe that the book of Proverbs was written in the earlier days of his kingdom and his life. And then I believe that the book of Song of Solomon was written in early to mid years. And then the book of Ecclesiastes was written at the end of his life or towards the end of his life. And so there's that. I say that is on purpose because when he was described by people in the book of Kings and even, Proverbs as we think about him, he's been described as the wisest man that ever lived, right? You know what I'm talking about. Solomon, the wisest man, the richest man, but the wisest man that ever lived. Wealthy, wise, all of that stuff. And again, part of it's because he started out with humility. Here he was, this son of a not a perfect ideal mother and father situation. Take your Bible and go to 1 Kings. We'll be back here in just a moment, Ecclesiastes. I'm going to go ahead and do this other passage right this moment. By the way, I'll also say this while I'm looking through Scripture. it reminds me that I am going to be doing a midday Bible study starting next Tuesday. Tuesday at 11 o'clock, that's a change. Typically I did it on Wednesdays. I have to teach at the school on Wednesdays. So I'm going to do it Tuesday in the front rooms over here. And we'll start next Tuesday, and we're going to go through the book of 1 Kings. And so that's not a corporate event, so you can come or not come. Okay, just thought I'd throw that out there. There are some like that. I don't care if it's a Bible study in somebody's home. I don't care if it's like that, but this is a corporate event, and those are not. I'll help clarify that, hopefully, as we go forward. I'm thumbing through my Bible trying to find Kings. I'm going to be teaching Kings on Tuesday. Where is it? It's got to be in there somewhere. Okay, there we go. I see it. There we go. Good. We got it. So 1 Kings chapter 3. And so what we have here is, I think we'll go ahead and start this. We'll start verse number 6. Verse 5. Chapter 3, 1 Kings 3, verse 5. In Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night. And God said, ask what I shall give thee. Solomon said, thou hast showed unto thy servant David, my father, great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth, and in righteousness and in uprightness of heart with thee. And thou hast kept for him this great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, and I am but a little child. Notice that phrase. I don't know how to go out or to come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered or counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy so great a people? And the speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said unto him, because thou hast not asked, because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself long life, neither hast thou asked riches for thyself, or hast thou asked life of thy enemies, but thou hast asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee wise and understanding heart, so there is none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not any more any among the kings of like unto all thy days. A little stipulation, verse 14. And if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, a little music will help, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. And he awoke, and he's so happy. And it does talk about in Chronicles how God gave him a wise heart. And then, of course, the first test of that was with the two women that had babies, and the one had died, and they brought him, and he said, cut the baby in half, that whole story, and that was the illustration of his wisdom. But I read those verses on purpose because when Solomon started off in his what would be public type ministry, he was the king at this point, very humble, very much trusting in God, very much, God, I need you, I want your help in this whole situation. Now, as it's around 900 BC, he is now at the end of his life, and he is now really having some issues. It's interesting, he never brings up Jehovah in the passage here. He calls God Elohim, which is like a creator type of a thing, or that, but he doesn't really talk about him in more of a personal feeling. He doesn't have that personal relationship with the Lord. I want you to be careful. None of us should make too strong of doctrines from the book of Ecclesiastes. All scripture is given by inspiration is powerful for doctrine, so there's going to be that. But you want to be careful because you can take verses out of context pretty easy in the book of Ecclesiastes. And so I want to be careful about that. But he calls himself the preacher, not only here, but 16 times throughout the book. And Solomon's reign, again, started off as a preacher when he first actually finished the temple, and he went there and he preached. A great message, and the power of God came, and smoke came upon the temple, and it was just a powerful moment there. So he was like a preacher, even though he was a king, and that's what he calls himself here in this particular passage. I thought it was interesting, even at the end, he's a proclaimer, a preacher. He was a man who, I believe, did know God very well at one point. He was a man who actually, again, the wisest man that ever lived, yet he seems to drift back and forth in his view of life. And the perspective, he's now using more of a perspective, in fact, almost all a perspective of just from a human wisdom standpoint. And so he's looking at this phrase, and we'll see this in a little while. He's like under the sun. What's going on here? Not necessarily God involved with it, but what's going on here. There are two lenses people have said to look at this book in. The first lens, some people may say is true. I'm not really a proponent of this, but that he's just vented about the disappointments of his life. That this is just a book that God is letting him write. And again, I don't know why God would let him write a book just to vent about his dissatisfaction with life. But there's that angle, because it does look like he's very disappointed in life. And we're going to see that throughout the passage of Scripture. But then the second view was he wasn't necessarily venting to us. At this point in his life, he's actually warning us. And I'm going to take that view, because I do believe at the end of the book, chapter 12, in fact, probably the second or third time I ever spoke, I was one of the first 3 times I ever spoke publicly to teach the Bible. The pastor says, would you speak for something? It's like, okay, what do I speak on? He said, well, whatever God lays in your heart. It's like, I don't even know this book very well. Back in those days, you just don't know. And so I love that I came across Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verses 6 and 7. It's like, those are the verses. Let's hear the conclusion of the matter. What did he say at the end? What's the conclusion of the matter? And what is it? Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. Go back to that. And so that's what I spoke on that particular day. And, the crowd went crazy. It was just amazing. But I will take this second view that he's really warning us about the path that he ended up taking. Because oddly enough, this guy that's supposed to be so wise, he took a path that wasn't so wise, right? So look here at verse number 2. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit hath a man under of all his labor which he hath taken under the sun? He said, what's the point? Basically, what's the point? Everything's vanity. When you think about the word vanity, what do you mean by that? What is it? What comes to your mind? It's just empty. There's just like no purpose. Like, what's the point? There's no purpose here with this whole situation. And I think that's a major emphasis in this book. As far as he was concerned, at this point, at the end of his life, at least he's telling us, I got to the point where everything was vanity. Everything was empty. There just had no feeling or purpose with it. It may be good to ask ourselves once in a while, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? The old story or joke maybe about the mother. I've heard 2 different versions of it, but the mother who, let's just say it was preparing the ham, all right? She's preparing the ham, and before she prepares it, she cuts off the ends of the ham and puts it in the pan. And then the daughter asked, why do you cut off the ends of the ham? Well, because my mother did. So then the grandmother came over and said, hey, we have a question for you. Why do you cut off the ends? Well, I didn't have a very big pan. Sometimes you have to ask the question, why are we doing what we do? We tried to do a little of that when we talked about our continue theme. Are there some things that should continue? Are there some things that just don't need to continue? And so it's a good thing to do periodically is to evaluate ourselves. What should we continue? Where's the profit in this thing? I like purpose. Otherwise it's vanity. That's not good. I like profit. It says, what profit hath a man of all his labor? He said, what's the point of working? And everything has got a purpose. I think about this pen that I have. I carry these nice cross pens. I've carried them for 40 some years. I've carried this exact type of pen. And it's just part of my life, I guess, now. But the purpose of this pen is not just to look at it. Obviously, it's got to write for me. If it doesn't write for me, what's the point of having this pen? It's just a foolish thing to carry around. And so I have a purpose with my pen, and we have a purpose as well. And he was saying, what's the point? I don't even see the point. I don't see a purpose. I don't see a purpose for me. I don't see a purpose for anybody. I think everything is vanity. What doth it profit? I'm going to give you a couple scriptures. Isaiah 48, verse 17. It's an interesting verse. Thus saith the Lord thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel, I am the Lord thy God, which teacheth thee to profit, which leadeth thee by the way that thou shouldest go. So the word profit there could mean, financial profit. It could mean, benefit. I'm going to help you in your life. And I think it is important. Many times people just think of the profit. What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose the whole soul? So lost people, don't hold on to the money just so you won't get saved. But 1 Corinthians 12 also talks about the Spirit giving us gifts. And those gifts are given to profit each of us, to profit the ministry. And so profit's a good word. I'm not opposed to that at all. And he says, what profit? What's the point? What's the profit? Everything's vanity. I think that there is purpose. I think there is profit. I think that God has got clear guidance and direction. That's why we're trying to understand Ecclesiastes in the right light. Verse number 3, what profit hath a man of all his labor, which he taketh under the sun? About 27 times that phrase under the sun is referenced in Ecclesiastes. What would that lead you to believe he's talking about? Things just on earth. The things that are below God. It's from below God down. So that just leaves who? Well, look around. That's who this leaves. Is that going to be a wonderful life? I mean, sure, we like our friends. We like all that. But if you don't have God, if all you've got is what this world has to offer, it can be pretty discouraging. I don't know what's happening tonight over in Iran. There's talk about that we sent, I don't know what's happening. I don't know if anything's going to happen tonight. I've heard, who knows? We don't know what's going to happen. But, the world's a mess. We got, Minnesota riots. We got California riots. We got stuff going on all over the place. I don't understand it. Sometimes I'm like, we've got replaced good for evil and evil for good. It's just like, what is wrong with us? The Supreme Court, bless her heart. I'm talking about Jackson. She still cannot figure out what a woman is. And they just, none of them can figure it out. And the Supreme Court are asking them, can you tell us what a woman is? Well, we really don't know. That's a tough question. Wow, we've come a long way, baby, there, from the John Jay days and all that. And so anyway, he's trying to understand life from under the sun, which means only human wisdom, basically. He's looking at it that way. And the Bible does speak that there is wisdom that is from above, and then there's wisdom that is from below, which again, that's where we're talking about our wisdom, the man's wisdom, as opposed to God's wisdom. When we pray for wisdom, we ought not to just say, God, I want to know how to be a good scientist. It ought to be, God, I want to use science well. I want to know how to use science. And so the conclusion with human wisdom is simply that all is vanity. And again, vanity or vanities, the word vanity or vanities is found 29 times. So that's a common theme there. He says that a lot as well. So under the sun, vanity, vanities. When we don't know the purpose of our life in God's big picture, I'm sure it can feel like, what's the point? Life is empty. What is the point? And I don't know what the suicide rate is doing for sure. I didn't check that, I guess, before I came here. I'm guessing there's still a problem with a lot of suicide and mental illness and people wondering, why should I even bother to live? And that's very sad. Because I believe that God does give us purpose. I believe that God gives us a plan and things that we are to do. And I know that not every life is perfect. We know that there are difficulties. But we don't want to live an empty life. And I think, again, we've got to, if we feel like we're living an empty life, we better start looking at it more from God's view, His wisdom, instead of just under the sun's wisdom. Stephen Covey is an author, and he's had a lot of quotes. One of the quotes I've quoted similar before is, if the ladder is not leaning against the right wall, every step we take just gets us to the wrong place faster. And again, I'm not saying this crowd here, but many times the world, people that their ladder is leaning up against the wrong wall. And they're climbing the corporate ladder. They're going to get there, and they find out it's leaning against the wrong wall. There's just no point. And it leads them to a place that they are even getting further away than where they wanted to be. As far as Solomon is concerned in this backslidden state, he's going to conclude, we're going to read the verses, that nothing in life is really worth it. And I would just simply say, keep sharp objects away from him. He's at the point of, and there are people that just, I don't know what the point of life is here. I think I'm just done with it. And again, I don't believe that that's our decision. That's God's decision, right? It's God's decision of when we live or when we die. And a lot of times people can work in our lives and get to the point of what's the point too. Some people may call this a midlife crisis. Is that possible? What are the signs? Should we ask a guy, what are the signs of a guy having a midlife crisis? What are the signs of a lady having a midlife crisis? What you want to tell me? Which one is it? Should we start with the ladies or the men? Start with the men. Okay, they're easy. What's a sign that they want? They may be in the midlife crisis. Buy a fast sports car, right? I got to be like 18 again or something like that. Is that what it is? I don't know. What? Fast sports car. All right. What's another one? What else happens? What happened to Cole? Is he out of I'm sorry, just kidding. Oh, that was mean. Was that mean? I'm sorry. I don't mean to do that to you. Who else wants to tell me what happens when a guy starts going and feels like a midlife crisis? What does he do? He gets a younger woman. I heard a story about a couple, and they got this amazing, like a genie type of thing. I'm sure it's true, but they said you have 3 requests, and so the first request they said we'd like to be like on a deserted island just with us. It'd be great, and so just like bam, there they are on an island, just the 2 of them, and then she says something about I want to be with my husband, and I don't forget what it was. And then his request came, I want to have, since I'm going to be with her for like the next 50 years or whatever she'd asked for, I want to be 30 years, I want a 30 years younger wife. And just like that, he turned 90. He was 60. That was just a terrible, I do a terrible job of jokes. I used to be better at it, but did you catch it finally? Finally, he's 90. All right, let's not do that anymore. Oh, man. So what are another sign? So he gets a faster car, maybe he gets a different wife. James, what are you thinking? Changes his wardrobe. He's got to be cool now. All right, yeah, got to be spiffed up. What? Leather jackets, leather pants. Leather pants, that's gross. That's just me. I don't understand that one. All right. What's another sign a man might be going through a midlife crisis? Skydiving, and I'm going to go and do whatever I can to just, golf like all week or something. I'm sorry, some of you guys are going golfing. Is he going through it right now? Is he going through his midlife crisis? It's been a long time coming. It's been happening a lot. All right. What's a couple of signs of a lady going through a midlife crisis? Do they do such a thing? They dye their hair. All right. All different. What colors? Does it like to be blonde or something? What? Blonde or any color? Any color. Okay. Oh, let's do some pucker up. If you watch some of these people that had this work done, it's like you should have stopped like a long time ago. You should sue somebody for that job, Duck clips. That's just sad. What's another possible sign? They might be going through that. How about they start tanning and go and lose weight? Oh man, watch out! There's an affair about to show up. Right? I'm thankful. You girls, you're wonderful. You look beautiful, but you got to watch out if they're starting to do all these things. Like, what is going on here? Anyway, I don't know where I'm at with this Bible study, but I think again, he is really struggling at this point in his life. And, there's the question that humanity's been asking for a long, long time. I remember I was telling the young people today, when I was in 4-H, we had a statewide 4-H convention, and there were about 1,000 teenagers there. And some of us met. We were going to lead that week of the actual activities. And, they said, what do you want to talk about? And they said, the questions people keep asking is, who am I? Why am I here? And, where am I going? It's the same questions that humanity's asked all throughout life. And so, we tried to discuss some of those things. But of course, there's back in Minnesota humanists back in those days as well. Joseph Fletcher was really coming on strong in those days in his humanistic ways. But how did it happen that Solomon, this such a wise guy, started off so well? Is there one passage of scripture that comes to your mind of what happened to him? Maybe I could give you 2 passages. What are you thinking? Okay, so we're going to go to those 2 passages. We're going to go to 2 passages. So let's first go to Deuteronomy 17. Let's do that first. I'm kind of not really getting very far in Ecclesiastes tonight, but that's okay. I really want you to see these things. So Deuteronomy 17, verse 14, we'll start there. It's interesting. Before Israel ever had a king, and now he's the 3rd king, God had told Moses to write this down, Deuteronomy 17. And I think it's a good principle for our president. I think it's a good principle for every leader to abide by these things. Verse 14, are you there? Deuteronomy 17, 14. The Bible says, when thou art come unto the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, and shall possess it, and shall dwell therein, and shall say, I will set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me. Which exactly happened after Samuel's, prophet, priest, and king time. They said, we want to reject all this. We want a king, and they made Saul the king. Verse 15, then shalt thou in any wise set him king over thee, whom the Lord thy God shall choose. One from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee, that thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. But he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that they should multiply horses. For as much as the Lord had said to them, ye shall henceforth return no more that way. Neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away. Neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold. It shall be, when he sitteth upon the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write him a copy of this law in a book, out of that which is before the priests the Levites. And it shall be with him, and he shall read therein all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to keep all the words of this law and his statutes to do them, and that his heart be not lifted up above his brethren, and that he turn not aside from the commandment to the right hand nor to the left, to the end that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. So before they ever had a king, God said, don't go back to Egypt, multiplying horses, don't multiply wives, don't multiply silver and gold. And what did he do? He did exactly those things. Let's look at 1 Kings chapter 11. 1 Kings chapter 11. It wasn't only but a few chapters before that he clearly had asked for humility. He had humility and asked for wisdom. And now we get over here to 1 Kings 11, and I'll see here verse number 3. Well, let's go back to verse 1. Start right there, the verse 1. Are you there? 1 Kings 11, 1. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Edomites, the Zidonites, the Hittites, of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, ye shall not go into them, neither shall they come in unto you. And that was way back from the Genesis 6. It was way back from when they went into the promised land. The Christians or the Israelis were supposed to marry Israelis, and it was just supposed to be that way. For surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. And he had 700 wives, princesses, whatever they called it there, yes, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. Now David again had his issues, right? But when we see in verse 6, Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord and went not fully after the Lord as David his father. And so he's building, actually he goes so far as to build in verse 7, he's building these like mosques for these people. He's building these, worship places for them. Verse 9, the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned from the Lord God of Israel, which appeared to him twice. And he commanded him concerning this thing that he should not go after other gods, but he kept not that which the Lord commanded. So we see the problem. We see it very clearly here. And God ended up stirring up adversaries, and he had more problems than he needed at that point. But it was because, again, he allowed a who or a what to change him. Now, lest you think you're going to be so fine in your Christian life, you and I have got to be careful for a who or a what. Because if Solomon, the guy that was the wisest man that ever lived, could have such a downfall because he allowed, in this case, the money, the women, all of it, to take his heart away from the God, you think we're better than that? You think we couldn't possibly have that happen to us as well? So what do we do to counter that? Well, we got to have short accounts with God. We got to have a constant relationship with God. We constantly have to stay in his word. Otherwise, we could go down that terrible path ourselves. So the answer is stay in the Bible, stay close to the relationship with the Lord, maintain that relationship well. When you know you do wrong, you confess it, you get it right, and you go on and have a constant relationship with God. Well, let's go into some of the Bible here. I've been talking too much on other things. Verse number 4. One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh. I'm back in Ecclesiastes. Did you notice that? Did I tell you that? Ecclesiastes 1:4. One generation passeth away, another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. The wind goeth toward the south, and turneth again to the north. It whirleth about continually. The wind returneth again according to its circuits. It's interesting. Matt, you're a weatherman, when did they know about the circuits and the currents and all that? Is this something fairly recent? They knew? Well, they should have known if they read the Bible. That was my point. I mean, he was describing wind currents back before probably people were talking about the wind currents, creating the, change in temperatures and so forth. So, verse 7, all the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. All things are full of labor, man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Always want more. Verse 9, the thing that has been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done. There's no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It hath been already of old time, which is before us. There's no remembrance of the former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of the things that are to come with those that shall come after. Now, those are pretty discouraging verses, but basically, in some ways it's not. It's just like it's the rotation of life. It basically is the rotation of life. The sun comes up, sun goes down. The wind goes over here, one generation comes, another generation comes away. It just, generations come and go. My oldest son was born just 2 weeks after my dad died. And these kind of things happen, just life happens. And so it is part of what we have to deal with in life, that just, life is going to do that. Now, is the answer new things? Is that the answer? Because there's really nothing new, but we think sometimes getting a new thing may be the answer, but maybe we're like the people in the book of Acts, always looking for a new thing. I think sometimes to go back to the old things might not be a bad idea either. Verse number 11, he said there's no remembrance. And I thought that was interesting because it's like an illustration. For example, if you had a bucket of water here and you put your hand in the bucket and then you took your hand out, you really wouldn't notice much difference in the bucket of water. If your hand's in the bucket, it's maybe a little higher, but it's really not. It doesn't have that much impact. I know we all feel like we're the most important person in the world, but truthfully, as every one of us is replaceable, we are. And we got to be careful not to get too high on ourselves. There'll be a few people in history that are known for generations and generations, but not that many. Ones God chooses to have, but most of us, can you name your great-great-grandparents? You can. Some of you can. I don't have a clue. I really don't have a clue. I know my grandparents. I don't know my great-great-grandparents at all. I don't have any clue about them. And that's a little bit sad to me because they're not that far removed from me. But here I should know some, but I don't. And so I don't know what your kids and grandkids and great-grandkids, if they'll know you, remember you, know anything about you. I don't know. That's why Trump wants to probably have his Mount Rushmore, image, so that people remember it for a long, long time. I think he's going for that. Trust me, I promise he is. Doesn't take inside information to know that, right? That's kind of pretty clear. But generations come and go. The earth life is mostly continues on, just got the cycle of life going on. And as far as Solomon was concerned in all this whole picture, he was just a dot in time. What's the point of my life? And again, we're looking back at his life, so he's remembered. And again, some of the stuff that he's going to say, keep in mind, he's saying it either to give us a warning about don't go down this path like I did for a while. I think that really is the case. But that's what he felt like for a while. Verse number 12. I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I gave my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail that hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. That which is crooked cannot be made straight. That which is wanting cannot be numbered. I communed with my own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to a great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart hath great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I gave my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief, and in the increased knowledge increases sorrow. What kind of wisdom was he pursuing, do you think, right there? Probably more man's wisdom. Like, how does this work? How does this happen? And at some point, if you're not an engineer, if you're not a scientist, it may cause you to go nuts. It's like, wow, this is so complicated. I don't understand exactly how this works. And maybe that's it. He wanted to give himself to know everything that everybody else knew. Maybe that's what it was. It seemed like when the phrase under the sun is given there again, it seems like he's pursuing more the things of how do things operate on this earth? How do we create things? How do we make things? How does this work? I think that's the gist of it. Any comments about that? Do you sense that's what he's doing there? Because he said under the sun, how does this work? Because he said, I gave myself my heart to know wisdom. I wanted to learn. I don't think it's necessarily the wisdom, though, that he was getting from God. By the way, wisdom and knowledge, especially man's wisdom, are only to be a means to an end. I mean, it's good that we get education. It's good that we get training. It's good that we have scientists. It's good that we have people that are creating things and making things. But again, there's man's wisdom and then there's God's wisdom. So now, what do we do with that? We can make an atomic bomb. Now, what do we do with that? We can have a nuclear weapon. Now, what do we do with that? We can do this, but we can have these things, but now what do we do with those things? We can have a lot of money. We can have a lot of whatever. But what are we doing with it now? And it is a little contrary to what he had written in Proverbs, because in Proverbs he said, wisdom is the principal thing. Get wisdom, get understanding. I mean, he's constantly saying we need to get wisdom and understanding. But I think, again, it's the wisdom and understanding that's coming from God's side that he said in Proverbs. I think he's pursuing it from man's side in Ecclesiastes. Does that make sense at all to anybody here? There's two different kinds of wisdom, man's wisdom, God's wisdom. And so that's what I think he's pursuing now is man's wisdom. Not once does the book ever record, it's interesting to me in Ecclesiastes, a couple things I noticed about it. I don't see ever the Bible really referenced. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that's referencing. But as far as quoting Scripture, I don't see it. As far as, let me ask another question. So who's his prophet that's helping him during this time? Does he ever mention a prophet? I don't see him ever mentioning a prophet. Did David have a prophet that he was mentioned periodically? The main one is who? Nathan the prophet that was constantly getting him back into place. But see, I don't know who Solomon put around him. He might have had a prophet at one point. Michael? Absolutely. And they probably said, we don't need that prophet you used to have hanging around the temple. Let's get rid of that guy. We don't need that guy anymore. And so I think, it's like, it's funny. Certain presidents are interesting. Like President Clinton. I don't think President Clinton was complete evil. I think he was a womanizer. I think he had issues. I think there were a lot of issues with President Clinton, different philosophies about things. But I think when he got a hold of Jezebel, when I'm talking about Hillary, she don't want any preacher around, I guarantee you. I mean, that guy grew up Baptist, singing in the Baptist choir, and she's like, get rid of those church people. Get those people out of here. We don't need those people around here. And that's just a side note. This is Wednesday night. This is what you get on Wednesday night. You wonder why you show up, right? It's probably true. By the way, Wednesdays in March, I'm telling you right now, got a lineup that's incredible. We're spending a lot of money. Put the word out because I want this place full on Wednesday night. So we're getting some great, great speakers. I told you some of them. You want me to give you a lineup? Bob Gray II from Texas. I didn't tell you that Sunday. Charlie Clark from New Jersey. Matt Tice from Las Vegas. These are great, great preachers and good guys. I want this place to be full when they're here. So anyway, and then Nick Anthony up at Wayne, Nebraska. He'll be good too. He'll be a blessing. So it's a great lined up there. So you'll get better when they come. But until then, you got me. You should feel sorry for me. I was supposed to be in Israel right now. See, my mind's still like, I don't even want to be here, But I'm here. It's fine. We're talking about how I think that, again, he didn't reference the Bible. There's no prophet involved in this story that's helping guide him. He's just doing it on his own. And he's got these women that are evil ones. There's great women, of course, wonderful, godly ladies, but he didn't have very many of those. He had a lot of these evil ones that were wanting to have him build his temples and mosques to those false gods and so forth. And so instead of trying to have Solomon understand the issues of life through the prism of God's wisdom, he's now looking at it through man's wisdom and understanding, and that's tainted. And he, like modern man, is trying to figure out all of the issues of life. And it's like the Mick Jagger song says, I can't get no satisfaction. It wasn't working for him. Everything's vanity. I don't mean to be putting some of you back into your old days. Probably shouldn't have done that. But, there is that frustration then that's coming. He's very frustrated with this world. He's frustrated with life. So the observations of chapter 1 are simply this. Life goes on without us. It will. Nothing is really new. That's good or bad. Styles come back. Long hair comes back, short hair comes back. Butter or margarine, what do you think? Butter used to be really bad. Then they went to margarine. Now they say margarine's bad. Now they got to go back to butter. Just a cycle of life. It's just, that was almost funny. But at some point, he realized I was going to be forgotten. It doesn't mean anything. And just emptiness is all that he found in chapter 1. So it's very sad. And this spirit continues into chapter 2. And so let's read just a little bit of chapter 2 just for a few moments here. He said in chapter 2, verse 1, I said in my heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. Let me ask a question. What is mirth? Because that's a word we don't use very often, but a lot of people maybe don't know what it is. You know what it is. Some of you know. See, a lot of you don't know what that is. So mirth, what would you describe it as? Having a good time, fun, happiness, joy, party time. So he's saying, I went to prove it with mirth. I went out to have parties. I went to have, fun times. I had just the most fun I could possibly have, and it wasn't that fun. It turned out to be vanity. I wouldn't mind maybe somebody while I'm reading here, want to go through, skim this. Let's say I'll go from verse number 1 down to verse number 13. Go to 14. Go to verse 14. Go to 15. Okay, so what? No, let's go to 17. Let's go to 18. It's there all over the place. Maybe out of this whole chapter, count how many times the word I is used. That's what I was trying to do here. Remember what made a devil out of Lucifer? In Isaiah 14, I will do this. I will 7 times it. I. When we start getting that I problem, boy, that's a problem right there. So he's describing now this mirth and these labor and the possessions. Let's look here, verse number 2. I said of laughter, it is mad, of mirth, again, joy, what doeth it? I sought in my heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men, which they should do under heaven all the days of their life. Verse 4, I may be great works. Are all these things bad? Let me ask the question. Are they all bad? They're not bad. In themselves, they're not bad. It's just if this is your pursuit, that's where it gets bad. I builded me houses. Nothing wrong with building a house. I planted me vineyards. Nothing wrong with planting vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards. Well, we love that. We like to plant gardens and orchards. That's great. I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. I love horticulture. I love planting trees. I made me pools of water to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. I mean, he had the whole horticultural thing all down. I got me servants and maidens and had servants born in my house. I had great possessions of great small and cattle, of all that were in Jerusalem before me. Man, you get a good cattle ranch, there's something beautiful about that. Cattle out there in the pasture, those are your cattle. That's a kind of a cool feeling right there. I gathered me also silver and gold, peculiar treasure of the kings of the provinces. I got me men singers and women singers. Boy, that's nice. Got a bunch of good singers, delights of the sons of men, musical instruments of all that sorts. He had all these wonderful, beautiful things. So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. My heart rejoiceth in all my labor. This was my portion of all my labor. Then I looked in all the works that my hands had wrought, in the labor which I had labored to do. And behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit. And there was no profit under the sun. So let's stop there just for a little bit. He gets all the physical pleasures, all the things that were pleasant to the eye, the orchards, the cattle, the singers, pleasant to the ear. He's just got it all, really, that people would enjoy. It sounds like a paradise that he built around himself. And yet he looked at it and was like, what's the point? I remember we went down to Oak Ridge Christian Ranch. It was a beautiful ranch, 3,800 acres, I think it was. 3-mile paved driveway to get back to it. Horse ranch it was originally. And Dr. Tom Williams was an evangelist, and he had his first wife had died, and he had a second wife, and they went to Israel, and she ended up getting spinal meningitis. She ended up becoming almost like a vegetable. She got better, and then she started to get worse. So we were down there at the ranch. It turned into a camp, a family camp for a while. My wife and I, family, were down there several times, and then we went down there for a Christian camp after that. I remember he took us on a tour of this mansion of a house. And there's this one room that they actually had to put the table in first and build the room around it because the table was so big they could never get the table in there without it. And he's showing us all this stuff. And then he just paused and he said, I don't have anybody to share this with, though. His wife is like almost a vegetable. And he didn't have anybody other than to show us around. But I kind of felt like that's how some people are with they've got all their stuff, but they don't have God, and they don't have God factor in the thing. And when you're without God, everything's a vanity, everything's just a waste. And so he got all of the pleasures, all of the things that people would say, houses and lands and all that stuff. And we think he describes all the greatest things in the world that are wonderful, but that wasn't the answer. And we're going to get into next week, we'll talk about it. He got into psychology. Like, well, what do we talk about this? And we'll learn about this. And I don't think that was satisfying him as well. So the conclusion was in verse 17, he said, I hated life. Because of all this, I hated life. Now, let's not get to the point we hate life. But again, just to wrap up this particular session, and that is, this is at a bad time in his life. He had let his heart get turned away from God because of who's and what's. It was mostly the women, but it was also the stuff. And he let his heart get turned away from God, probably not in relationship, fellowship with the Word of God, with God, and now he's just gone a bad way. Somebody asked me, I was American Express vice president out in California one time. I was sitting next to him, and he said to me, what keeps you up at night? And I said, well, nothing really keeps you up at night. But he said, what bothers you in ministry? And I said, what bothers me in ministry is when I watch people self-destruct. I can see it happening. I can see the destruction. I can see the one step at a time. One step leads to another step, leads to another step, and they end up being in self-destruction. And again, we don't have to go down that path. Stay close to the Lord. Continue having God's wisdom, not just looking at the things on this earth. The things on this earth will discourage you no matter how great they are. And may God help us to have truly a life that is blessed, and we're happy in it. And this guy was not happy. He's very frustrated at this point. So we don't want to go down that path. We'll study it again next week. All right, let's pray. Father, as we think about this story, we certainly don't want to go down the path that Solomon did. And I pray you'd help us. Father, help us to truly be pricked by your Spirit when we start to get astray at all. And help us to keep short accounts with you and want that relationship with you. Thank you for your word. Thank you for preachers and spiritual leaders that we can have in our lives, teachers that can help us. And Father, I pray that you'd help us to be sensitive to you, even through the word and through these people. And I pray that you bless us to help us to have a life that is truly satisfied. And we know we'll ultimately be satisfied when we're with you, but we can still be satisfied here, and we thank you for that. I pray you bless our people. I pray you give us a good week. We ask your help now in Jesus' name.